This video will examine some of the common problems in addressing Marcion of Sinope through the eyes of Tertullian and the rest of Marcion's detractors. Tertullian wrote a 5-volume work against Marcion, and his text provides a ton of information on Marcion, most of which is highly suspect. Now, here's some of the claims of Tertullian. Marcion believed Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, was a demiurge. Tertullian claims that Marcion used the demiurge concept in the sense of an evil spirit. Secondly, Marcion was anti-Jewish, and he dumped the Septuagint and all other works. Third, Marcion reworked the Gospel of Luke to fit his theology. Fourth, Marcion believed in docetism. Essentially, Marcion believed Jesus did not have a flesh body. Jesus was purely spiritual. Now let's take a look at these claims. First, the question of docetism. This seems like a plausible claim. What makes this plausible is the Gospel of Marcion as handed down by Tertullian and other church fathers in fragments. This text does seem to indicate that Jesus was not a physical human being. There is a reoccurring theme in Marcion of every time the sun goes down, Jesus disappears. It's a bit ambiguous, but there are a lot of indicators that point toward docetism being very plausible. Second, the question of the demiurge. This is a curious statement. The problem with this claim is that the demiurge is a Gnostic concept, and it is not necessarily evil. It's a derivative of Plato. A demiurge is a creator being, kind of like a watchmaker god concept. I find the demiurge concept questionable in Marcion. There is no trace of a demiurge concept in Marcion's Gospel or the rest of his canon. It seems very unlikely that Marcion would leave no trace of this concept in his works. The Gnostics left the demiurge all over their works. If Marcion was using the concept, it makes little sense that he would simply skip that part in his text. Third, Marcion was anti-Jewish. This claim is very unlikely. The Gospel of Marcion still connected Christianity to Jewish tradition, including Elijah and Moses. This simple connection actually contradicts some of the claims of the later church fathers that all Jews before Jesus were going to hell. Obviously, that claim by later authors is flat out wrong. And if complete anti-Judaism was the goal, bringing Elijah and Moses into his book makes little sense. The only other idea that potentially points to anti-Judaism is the Passion narrative, but his narrative is roughly the same as all the other accounts. It's certainly not the worst. Now, did Marcion dump the Septuagint? I don't really know. Typically, I find this an irrelevant claim, but again, I find it unlikely. His Gospel of Marcion was probably ambiguously docetic enough to cause a schism. His interpretations of the Septuagint may have been of interest, but dumping it makes little sense, especially if he's going to refer to these characters in his own Gospel. And finally, Marcion altered Luke. According to Tertullian, there were 2 reasons why he believed that Marcion altered Luke. First, Marcion wanted to reflect his docetism and make Jesus a spirit rather than flesh. Second, Tertullian claims that Marcion was anti-Jewish and wanted to remove Jewish references. The first argument seems possible, but again not likely. If you're willing to cut up a text, why wouldn't you be willing to simply write your own text? And this argument depends on Luke being first. Tertullian is writing 60 years after Marcion wrote his Gospel. Nobody has complained about it this entire time, but now it's important? This makes no sense at all, and it's far more likely that Marcion's book was written before Luke. And the claim of anti-Judaism simply doesn't hold. In no way is anti-Judaism supported either by the text of Marcion or his contemporaries or anyone else until Tertullian's claim. If this was true, why did no one else mention it? Why does Marcion's Gospel have positive references to Jewish characters? I typically give these authors a lot of credit, but when heresy claims are thrown around, big red flags pop up, and Tertullian's book against Marcion really can't be trusted. Outside of a rather vague plausibility for docetism, I see nothing here that's very different from Proto-Catholicism. The heresy claims, as written by Tertullian, are mostly unsubstantiated, and some of the claims even end up being contradictory to Marcion's own work, which is very strange. Marcion's religion did indeed survive Tertullian, but you get the sense that the heresy claims are about demonization rather than getting their facts straight. And as a final note about Tertullian, he is a Montanist. Tertullian is very interested in getting the prophetic works of Montanism canonized. His claims of anti-Judaism specifically are probably being used for that goal. Marcionism's objection to the prophetic texts may have been on the terms that they were illegitimate, heretical, and not terribly Christian. So there's a high likelihood that Tertullian simply lit up the founder of Marcionism as a heretic for the sole purpose of getting more works canonized. Tertullian does have a very serious potential motive here, and again, I'd love to trust his characterizations of Marcion, but they just don't add up. Most of Tertullian's claims are simply not supported by evidence.